Good evening. My name is Dave. Thank you for joining our live interactive telephone town hall. We're hosting tonight's event to give Congresswoman Spanberger the opportunity to hear directly from you and answer your questions about the issues facing Virginia's families and economy. As I mentioned, this event is an interactive forum. Congresswoman Spanberger will be taking as many questions as she possibly can during the event. If you have a question, you can press *3 on your phone keypad at any time, and you will be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. They'll take down your name and where you're calling from. The next time you hear your name, you will be live on the call, and you will be able to ask your question directly. You can also ask a question by submitting one through the portal below our online streaming player at spanberger.house.gov. Again, that's spanberger.house.gov/live. If you're watching on Facebook Live tonight and wish to ask the Congresswoman a question, we encourage you to visit that online streaming portal so you can submit your question. Additionally, if you'd like to receive updates from our office via email, please press *6 on your phone keypad at any time, and an operator will collect your email address. We could receive a lot of questions during this event, so if we're not able to address your question, please call our district office at 804-401-4110 during normal business hours. Again, if you have any questions throughout the event, please press *3 on your keypad or type them below the streaming player. Now, without further delay, I'd like to turn the floor over to Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger for some opening comments.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Abigail Spanberger. I look forward to hearing from you this evening. I look forward to answering your questions about the issues that are top of mind for you, for your families, for your businesses, and for our communities. I wanted to begin by addressing major news from Friday when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. And certainly I've heard from constituents across the political spectrum who are concerned about what this means for access to reproductive health care in Virginia and across the country. Certainly as a mother, as a sister, as a daughter, I recognize that this ruling is impactful for so many women and men. And I know that it signals that in some ways our country suddenly changed. Rights that were previously guaranteed by the Constitution, constitutionally protected, laws we thought were settled case law, indeed are no more. And so in the past few days, I have heard from many Virginians who have concerns about what this ruling means for all of the rights that may be founded on this principle of privacy, the right to contraception, same-sex marriage, protections under the 14th Amendment of our Constitution, and the rights that are founded based on privacy and due process. I'm concerned about protecting these rights and certainly working hard to determine from a federal perspective what comes next. If you'd like to share your thoughts or concerns with my office about this issue or any other, please do not hesitate to call 804-401-4110. You can also be in touch with our office via the website spanberger.house.gov. And I also want to give an update on something that I hear about every day from Virginians, and that's inflation. In recent months, we have seen the cost of groceries continue to go up. We've seen gas prices continue to rise. And certainly this is on many people's minds as we head into the 4th of July weekend. Certainly Congress can do more to combat inflation. And earlier this month, a bipartisan majority in the House of Representatives passed my legislation, the Lower Food and Fuel Costs Act. This is a bill that we put together to help reduce prices on two essential goods, food and fuel, and aptly named it so. And this bill passed the House with bipartisan support, and we've moved it over to the Senate. Just last week, the U.S. Senate Agriculture Committee voted to pass one of the provisions in the bill that I led with Congresswoman Miller Meeks of Iowa, the Meat and Poultry Special Investigator Act. I championed this legislation on behalf of Virginia's livestock producers as well as consumers at the grocery store. This bipartisan bill would address consolidation and anti-competitive practices within the meatpacking industry, which is dominated by just 4 companies. These practices are driving up prices for consumers, stacking the decks against family farmers like those I represent in Virginia's 7th District, and really threatening the long-term security of our food supply chains. So I was excited to see that movement in the Senate and look forward to the Senate potentially moving forward quickly with our larger bill, the Lower Food and Fuel Costs Act. Notably, I was also quite excited today. I got a fact check from VPN. I had recently written an op-ed that ran in Fox News talking about the fact that the big four meat packers are raking in record profits. And in the op-ed, I talked about the importance of the legislation that we put forth because we are seeing that the cost of food, particularly meat and poultry, continues to rise and outpace inflation overall. And just as an example, beef prices rose 12.3% over the last 12 months, ending at the end of May, which outstrips the 8.6 inflation rate. So this is a serious difference. And so they fact checked me because I said that the four big meat packers are raking in record profit. And in the fact check, which I note this because this is why the legislation is important, JBS, one of the big four, had a record profit for the 12 months period prior. They had a 70% increase in their profits, and their net profit was $4.4 billion. Tyson had a record $4.1 billion net profit. That's a 91% increase over the prior 12 months. Cargill, which is privately held, but Bloomberg has reported on their numbers, they had a $4.9 billion in net income. So that's 60% increase over the prior 12 months. And Marfrig had a net profit of $820 million with a 32% increase over the prior year. So when I'm working on this legislation, it's because this consolidation within the meat processing industry, it hurts farmers and producers, and it certainly has down the line impacts on consumers. So I'm glad to see the progress in the House and certainly in the Senate. Congress cannot shy away from and has to address head on the issues of rising prices, inflation, consolidation, and supply chain challenges that are hurting the financial security of Americans, our families, our businesses, our communities. And it is my job to listen and represent and respond with legislation that can help solve and address these problems. So with that, I'd like to get to the listening. I look forward to hearing your questions, and I'll turn it back to the moderator.
All right, thank you, Congresswoman. And just as a quick reminder, this forum is interactive, and we'd love to hear your questions. If you have a question, you can press *3 on your keypad at any time to get in the queue to ask a question. A member of Congresswoman Spanberger's staff will collect your questions. You can also ask a question by submitting one through our portal below the online streaming player at spanberger.house.gov. Again, that's spanberger.house.gov/live. And if you're watching on Facebook Live tonight and wish to ask Congresswoman Spanberger a question, we encourage you to visit that online streaming portal so you can submit your questions. And we're going to go to the phones right now. We're going to lead off here with Jen. Jen, welcome to the phone call. You're on live with the Congresswoman. What is your question?
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Congresswoman Spanberger, for everything that you're doing. So my question is kind of a two-prong event. On Friday, President Biden addressed the nation and said, if any state or local official, high or low, tries to interfere with a woman's exercising her basic right to travel, I will do everything in my power to fight that deeply un-American attack. And today in the New York Times, there was an article about payment data could become evidence of abortion, now illegal in some states, that financial companies could be forced to turn over payment data from customers who seek abortions out of state. My question to you is, what should Congress be doing to safeguard a woman's interstate travel to seek an abortion?
Well, thank you for this question. And really at the heart of the question is the privacy related to our data. And so Congress, we have been having many conversations. We'll be moving forward with legislation related to data privacy. Of course, there are many apps online that people use to track fertility, that people use to track their menstruation. And this information could potentially be utilized by investigators who would want to use it to note if a woman potentially has become pregnant, not to mention online purchases, of various different, be it pregnancy tests or otherwise. This is in addition to what you speak of, which is travel information for when someone might potentially be traveling outside of this state, if they live in a state where the laws have changed and there is no access to the right to choose in that state. Certainly, right now, what we know is that digital privacy is protected really by a pretty incomplete patchwork of state laws and federal regulations. Of course, we have HIPAA, which is across the board really the gold standard, and that applies within the actual medical sphere. But it does not apply, as I mentioned, to any of these online apps that people might utilize to track their own health data. And so this is certainly a weakness in the current law and something that we are looking at how we can strengthen that. Ultimately, we are looking at and we need to introduce and pass legislation that would require firms to only collect and retain information on a strictly needed basis. And otherwise, they would have to obtain additional information or additional consent from users to be able to explicitly save additional information. Certainly, we have seen that just over the past few years, requests for information from large-scale data companies like Google, like Microsoft, has nearly doubled. And what we do know also is that companies like Google, like Microsoft, frequently do, when requested by the government, share the information. And normally, under normal circumstances of law enforcement activity, that's helpful. But when it's the private data and health-related records, though not potentially HIPAA protected, that becomes a different story and a different question. And so you rightly bring up the question related to potential travel documents, potential out-of-state payments for health services or clinic-related services. And that is something that we are moving on quickly within Congress to protect that data so that, as the president mentioned in his speech, and certainly as I support, and so many of my colleagues support, that if a woman chooses to travel and chooses to exercise her right in a state where such a right is legal, that the ability to access data of what a woman does outside of her state of residence is something that should be kept private. And really, the right to interstate travel should not in any way be constrained in any circumstances, as I think is should be clear.
All right, thank you, Congresswoman. Next up, we have June on the line. June, welcome to tonight's phone call. What's on your mind tonight?
Hi. I am, of course, concerned about these gas prices, but I'm more concerned, rather than people worrying about how much more they're going to spend to get to their picnics, is what's going to happen to low-income and elderly people this winter when they cannot afford to heat their homes. We're trying so hard to help Ukraine right now, but we're not really doing anything to Russia with these sanctions. They're still making all the money they need to from China, and we're bearing the brunt of this. I myself spend about $3,000 a year to heat my home with oil, and now it'll be somewhere between $6,000 and $9,000, which is absolutely undoable. And I am not low income enough to qualify for any programs, but I'm a single person, and there's no way that I can afford that. So I'm afraid that people are actually going to die for these sanctions, and I don't hear anyone preparing for the winter, which is just around the corner, and what we're all going to do about that. And that's one of my two main concerns currently.
Before I address that one, did you want to raise a second concern?
Well, the second concern deals with the Supreme Court. We have justices who lied to get on the Supreme Court, and I feel like Democrats just want to always do the right thing, and I'm afraid it's time to fight fire with fire. We need to start talking about packing the court like Abraham Lincoln did, because this is not just about abortion rights. There's rumblings about contraception. There's rumblings about religious freedoms. There's rumblings about all kinds of things that seem very Handmaid's Tale to me, and we have this moment to change it before Biden is out of there, because I don't think he's going to make it, and I don't hear anyone really talking about doing something drastic. It's time to do something drastic. This isn't just about abortion rights, and we can't keep putting our fingers in all of these holes when the ship is sinking. And that's it. Those are my concerns.
Well, thank you. Thank you for raising them. Certainly, two very specific issues, very separate issues. So on the first part, you mentioned heating oil, and I do want to speak to that because it is the issue that you raised separate from gas for a car. But I do want to mention briefly just what it is that I've been working on as it relates to gasoline prices. Certainly in the bill that I led and that we passed in the House, it provides for year-round ethanol and biofuels access. Among the challenges that we certainly face right now is an issue of refinery capacity. So ensuring that we can have blended gasoline when that blending happens post-refinery is important for adding to the supply and ideally putting downward pressure on prices. Estimates are that depending upon the place and the region where one lives, the availability of this blended gasoline would have between a 20 and 40 cent impact, so decrease in price. So we're working to move that forward within the Senate. And certainly that is for your cars, that's the vehicle when you're moving, when you're traveling. But home heating continues to be a totally separate issue. And certainly I have been a supporter of assistance programs that do assist particularly those who are income challenged or lower income with heating programs. And certainly I continue to advocate for those during the appropriation process. But notably, that wasn't the core crux of the question. As I heard you note that you typically don't qualify for these programs. So there are a variety of things. One, there is the LIHEAP program. That's the Low Income Heating Energy Assistance Program that assists those families that are eligible for heating and cooling energy expenses, for bill payment assistance, for energy crisis, and for weatherization and energy-related home repairs, notably assisting towards energy efficiency so that the oil that one is using to heat one's house stretches a bit further. And certainly we saw that in our 2023 appropriations bills, we had pretty significant increases year over year with the appropriations there. So in the circumstances, and so as we're looking towards next year, next winter, which as you noted is not that far away, looking towards how those programs may be an issue of expanded eligibility, particularly as we continue to see increased prices. And this also gets us into some of the additional challenges with just the global energy market. You mentioned Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, certainly the destabilizing impact that that's had on global energy markets, and our choice to ensure, while the United States has been a net exporter, our choice to ensure that we are not importing Russian energy, I think, is one that I believe in, one that I voted for. But certainly, again, because we have been a net exporter and our Russian imports have been such a small portion of our energy consumption, the impact there has not been the direct driver of instability. It's more of the larger issue on the global market. Notably, also within the infrastructure bill, we had additional funding for the LIHEAP program. And so for any individual on the line who might have concerns about whether or not they will be eligible for the LIHEAP program, who's worried that the cost of gas may in fact be prohibitively expensive, but traditionally you might not qualify for that program, I would ask that you get in touch with my office. We're working to be as proactive as we can well before the winter months begin to come, to ensure that, depending upon where we are with global energy markets and localized prices and costs, that we can be responsive as possible. So please be in touch with our office with those questions. And related to where we go from here after the Supreme Court ruling, it's important that we codify at this point in legislation the rights that for quite some time we have viewed as being settled case law, be that Griswold versus Connecticut, be that Lawrence, be that Obergefell, be that Roe v. Wade. And so I am working in Congress with my colleagues to move forward legislation to further codify, again, the rights that had previously been viewed as settled law because of prior Supreme Court decisions, to ensure that the will of Congress and the will of people that it reflects is, in fact, the basis for some of the rights that, given Justice Thomas's additional opinion for the Dobbs opinion that came out on Friday, that there may be real risks to additional rights far beyond just the right to choose.
We're talking with Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger this evening, and as a reminder, this forum is interactive. We'd love to hear your questions. So if you have a question, please press *3 on your keypad at any time to get into the queue to ask a question. A member of Congresswoman Spanberger's staff will collect your questions. You can also ask a question by submitting one through the portal below our online streaming player at spanberger.house.gov. Again, that's spanberger.house.gov/live. And if you're watching on Facebook Live tonight and wish to ask Congresswoman Spanberger a question, we encourage you to visit that online streaming portal so you can submit your question. And with that, Congresswoman, we are going to go to an online question. This comes from Deborah. And Deborah asks, I had to drive 100 miles to find a small can of baby formula for my granddaughter. Can these baby formula companies have harsh regulations applied so this shortage does not happen again? My granddaughter cannot absorb just any formula.
Oh, Deborah, as a mother of 3 children, and I relied on baby formula on behalf of your son or daughter-in-law and son-in-law. I want to say thank you for being such a good grandmother. Thank you for your assistance there. And really, no family should have to drive 100 miles to get the baby formula that their child or grandchild needs. I have been hyper engaged on this issue since we started to see shortages across the United States. So just to give you some updates on what is occurring. So first and foremost, in the early days of when the shortages started happening, and thankfully, while Virginia has been very impacted, and certainly, Deborah, your experience is one, we did not see some of the shortages that, just based on supply chains, other states saw. That didn't make it any easier. And trust me, I heard from constituents across our localities about the hardships that everyone was facing. So among the steps that I've taken and where we are right now in this circumstance is certainly we have been importing baby formula from overseas. Meets all of the standards of formulas that we put forth here in the American market, though notably in Deborah's question, she speaks to her grandchild having some sensitivity and some special needs in terms of formula selection. And so that does make it harder for families. But we have been importing and bringing in foreign produced baby formula that meets U.S. standards and does meet various different dietary needs, though they may be different brands. Notably, the administration has leveraged the Defense Production Act to ensure that source ingredients for baby formula is going straight to manufacturers so that we can keep the manufacturing of baby formula moving at increased paces. And then importantly, as we are starting to have supply starting to increase and level out, it's incredibly important that we never see this happen again. And so, what's I think important here is that if if you in most types of foods, right? If you run out of, you can't get bread at the grocery store, you can get something else. If you can't get rice, you can get something else. If you can't get chicken, you can get beef. If you can't get baby formula, that's it. And that is, of course, stating the obvious, but that's the crux of this issue. So it is not a normal item. It is an item that cannot it's an item that cannot just be one-to-one replaced or substituted. So we have a bill that I have co-led with a colleague, Dusty Johnson from South Dakota, the Formula Shortage Reporting Act, which would require that manufacturers notify the FDA of any manufacturing issues that they may be facing, of any red flags that they may be facing where they may not be able to meet the orders coming their way. Now, this is very similar. It's modeled after what exists in the pharmaceutical space. So certain prescription drugs, if there is the potential that there will be a shortage, the manufacturers are required to report this possibility to FDA so that there can be some proactive steps taken. Had this been the case when we knew that we were headed towards a potential shortage, then we could have started importing earlier. We could have responded more proactively before there were parents and grandparents driving all over the state or all over looking for the baby formula, frantically looking for the baby formula that they need for their child or their grandchild. So this is a forward-looking, proactive step, making sure that this never happens again. And I'm proud that I partnered with Congressman Johnson on this front. And it, again, certainly doesn't solve the issue this time, but it is meant to work to ensure that we don't face it again. But Deborah, again, thank you for continuing to bring a voice to this very important issue. And one more thing, there's consolidation within the baby formula industry. I've talked a bit tonight about the consolidation within the meatpacking industry, and the challenge is the same. And we saw that one large manufacturing plant went offline, and really, with a couple other factors contributing to it, created an incredible shortage that has impacted so many families. So another thing that I'm looking at long term is consolidation within this industry. And there's been investigations into this in the past, but certainly if they're engaging in monopolistic and anti-competitive behaviors that ultimately can so negatively impact the consumer, especially babies, this is something that I'm continuing to work on legislatively. Thank you for your question, Deborah.
We're going to go back to the phones now, and next up we've got Taisha. Taisha, welcome to tonight's town hall. What is your question for the Congresswoman?
My question is in regards to the Supreme Court. When they were going through their hearings to be approved, it seems as if maybe 3 of them may have lied. And with the Clarence Thomas and his wife situation, the January 6th, there are people there that are maybe shouldn't be there, and that it seems like they're getting away with a crime in a sense. You said one thing on the oath, and then you do another thing, and then for the average American, if you're in a situation where you do anything related to your job, you get terminated. How do we sort of either get rid of or punish the justices that lied to the American people?
So, Taisha, thank you for this question. And I think it's an important one. And for the sake of this question, for anybody who might be listening, I want to be very clear in separating out 2 things. One may, as I am, be very, very distressed over the ruling that came out on Friday. And some constituents are not. Let's set that aside and talk about the reality that Taisha's bringing up, which is, were there Supreme Court justices who, while under oath, said something that they knew wasn't true, that potentially lied? And there's many people who are asking that question, Taisha being one of them. An earlier caller mentioned the same, because we have an obligation as Americans when we are under oath, be it in a court of law, be it before Congress, to tell the truth. It is an obligation, it is the requirement, and it is the expectation, certainly, that every American has, that when someone is in a court of law and they raise their right hand and they say they're telling the truth, they're under oath, that they tell the truth. When they go before Congress and on our committees, when witnesses come before our committees, and certainly it's on the Senate side that the nominated potential justices go before members of Congress on the Senate side, but we have on the House side, people come before our committees and they raise their right hand and they pledge to speak the truth. And so it is an obligation that people have. And so I think that that's an incredibly important question, whether or not individuals may have lied under oath. Certainly there's much documentation that shows pretty conflicting opinions in a short period of time, or conflicting statements in a short period of time. But I would urge every American who believes in the rule of law that they consider this question separate from the actual Roe versus Wade assessment, because this is about whether or not someone tells the truth when they are under oath. This is about the trust that we have in members of our Supreme Court, and that is separate from whether or not one was wholly distressed, again, as I was, by the ruling that came out on Friday, or kind of anywhere across the spectrum. And in the Constitution, which I have my handy version over here, in the Constitution, Congress is Article 1. We make the laws, and we can act to codify decisions. So just going back to those, as it sounds that this may be the case for Taisha, like so many of us, who are disturbed by the actual decision that came out on Friday, be it because of its impact on Roe versus Wade, the threat to Griswold, the threat to Obergefell, the threat to Lawrence. This is why Congress needs to continue to endeavor. And we have passed bills within the House, and we need to do additional work to bring forth enough of a coalition in the Senate to get bills to the president's desk. But we have to codify these rights to ensure that they are no longer under threat. So thank you for the question, Taisha.
Next up on the line, we have Marlene. Marlene, welcome to tonight's town hall. What is your question for the Congresswoman?
My question for Representative Spanberger, I want to thank you first for everything. This is my first time listening in and calling in. And I'm like the lady that talked about the fuel for the winter. And I'm senior citizen, and look like things are steady going up, up, up. I have no husband, no children, and I don't qualify for any kind of help because they keep telling me that I'm with 2 checks, I'm just getting too much money. And I know that my oil bill is going to be close to $2,500 to $2,800 this winter, and I'm scared to death.
Well, thank you for the Marlene. Thank you for the question. Thank you again for following up on a prior question related to household heating costs and oil bills. This is an incredibly important issue, and I am glad we are talking about it in June. And so, Marlene, I want to make sure that we have your contact information. And for anyone else who's listening on the line, I want to make sure that our office can ensure that there perhaps may be programs that you might qualify for that might not be among the most common. I would want to just make sure anybody who's listening who's worried about their oil bills come the cooler months that we are having these conversations now. So please be in touch with my office. You can call us at 804-401-4110. And Marlene, I believe we have your contact from when you just called in, so we will follow up with you directly. But please, anyone else who's listening in who has the same concern, There are a variety of different programs that can be supportive, particularly for seniors, particularly for those based on income brackets. So please be in touch. We have allocated additional funding to these programs year over year for this for fiscal year 23. We're working on appropriations right now because we want to make sure that you are getting all of the support and the benefits that you're either entitled to or that you have earned. So Marlene, because we have your number, we'll have someone follow up with you, but anyone else, please do call the office.
All right. Thank you very much, Congresswoman. And next up, we have got James on the line live with us. I believe. Had this one
Are you
more
there,
time.
James?
Excuse me. Sorry about that.
Are you there, James?
Oops, here we go. I'm sorry about that. That was my fault. That's an error on my end. James, you're on live now with the Congresswoman. What is your question?
Yeah. Yes. Hello, Congresswoman. It's a pleasure to speak with you. My question for you is for me and my wife is the biggest issues facing us going forward is the fact that what can you do for families now that we don't have the expanded tax credit, and going back to school now, my rising first grader is going to have to pay for lunch versus it was free last year. So those are two things that are directly affecting us that Congress had done something about that is no longer.
James, thank you for this question. And for those who may not have a child at home or who may not be aware of some of the changes that have been previously put in place, let me just revisit them. So the child tax credit was a policy that we put in place in 2021 for the year. That was a refundable child tax credit, so built off of the current system where one files your taxes and you get a credit based on children at home. The refundable tax credit advanced that refund to families, and certainly I have heard from constituents across the 7th District about the benefit that program provided. It's, again, making refundable a tax credit that they would otherwise be able to claim at tax time, but for families, it meant being able to enroll in preschool, if they wanted to go from part-time preschool to full-time preschool. It has been impactful for so many families, and James, as I hear it was for yours. I voted for, and wanted to continue the child tax credit in the refundable form, because while I mentioned some of the kind of practical impacts that it had on many families, it also lifted millions of American children out of poverty. And for a long-term perspective, from a national security perspective, and my background's national security before I got to Congress, ensuring that our children, our nation's children, have every opportunity is an incredibly important long-term planning investment. Children who are lifted out of poverty, children who are not raised in poverty, do, just economically speaking, long-term impacts are substantial. So I continue to advocate for this program that was life-changing for some families and incredibly helpful for others and everywhere in between, because it is a good investment in the next generation. It's a good investment in setting children up for higher literacy, setting children up for better economic earnings as adults. The list goes on and on. The benefits out of poverty. The second piece that James mentioned in his question was the school waiver program that existed because of COVID. And I led the effort. It was my legislation to continue the waivers exactly as they were. And what those waivers allowed was it allowed for school districts, frankly, to have far more flexibility in how they serve lunches to schools, to have far more flexibility in what it is that they are purchasing and serving, and then also to have a larger potential pool of students, because it was under that waiver program that there was no cost for school nutrition programs to any child, regardless of income eligibility. I worked, and frankly, this is a direct result of hearing from constituents like James and his family, but also hearing directly from school districts across our 10 counties where school nutrition program officers and superintendents were advocating for the flexibilities and the benefits of this program. The benefits are clear for individual families, and they're also very clear for school districts for their planning purposes, for their economic purposes, and for the kind of social benefit and school engagement benefit that the schools were seeing because of these programs. So we were able to extend some of the waivers. Again, I had wanted and wrote the legislation and pushed the legislation that would have continued them exactly as they were. Some of the waivers, what we ultimately were able to pass and get to the president's desk is that there are many waivers still in place, but the lunch benefit or the meal benefit for students who qualify for reduced lunch, that qualification is now for the full lunch. But students who have no qualification, who don't qualify for reduced lunch, they no longer receive that benefit. So James, to answer your question, and really I thank you for highlighting these two programs that have been really beneficial to our communities. I continue to advocate for both of them. I have voted to extend the child tax credit, and we did not have a path forward in the Senate. I led the legislation in the House to continue with the full meal waiver program, and ultimately what we were able to get through was a substantial meal waiver program, but does not have the same impact for every family if they do not qualify for a reduced lunch. But if there's any further questions that we can answer about that program, please do be in touch with our office. And anyone else who has a story that they want to make sure that I know about the impact of these programs, your stories are very helpful as I continue to advocate for policies that impact people on the ground across our district.
Congresswoman, I need to apologize to you and to our callers as well. I just had a power outage at my office, and it knocked my computer completely out. I'm in the process of trying to bring it back up, but it could take a minute or two. I truly apologize for that. We have a storm rolling through here right now, and I'm not going to be able to pull up the next caller. I'm not sure if anybody on the tech end can help us out here, but I'm getting this up as fast as I possibly can. I'm sorry about that.
All right. Well, so I have just been given a question communicated, sent to me that is a caller from online. So we'll work to get our ability to patch people through back up and running. But
thank you so much.
We have a question from Kristen. Kristen writes online, when will the border go back to at least the security we had at the beginning of 2021? So, Kristen, thank you for your question. Thank you for asking about border security. Thank you for bringing up this issue. It's an incredibly important one, and one that I have worked on aggressively since I first came to Congress. Back in my first term in Congress, of course, I'm in my second. In my first term in Congress, I worked on a bipartisan piece of legislation. I introduced a bipartisan piece of legislation with a Republican congressman from Texas, focused on border security and leveraging the intelligence that we have around the border to further make our border more secure, both as it relates to human traffickers, as it relates to narco traffickers and smugglers. Certainly that bill is something that I'm proud of, because ultimately that legislation was signed into law by former President Trump and is now in place. Looking at the continued challenges we face at the border, of course, I can't comment on this issue without raising the real tragedy that we have seen in Texas, where victims of human trafficking, people attempting to come to the United States, ultimately died because while they were being trafficked at the border. This is the sort of atrocity that exists. And frankly, it is an atrocity that needs to be addressed by comprehensive immigration reform. Ultimately, there are people throughout Central America and South America and many other countries over that wish to come to the United States of America. We are an extraordinary nation. We are an extraordinary nation of immigrants, and there are people that want to come here, seek economic opportunity, to work in the jobs that are available here. And there are people who want to come here seeking refuge from violence, from fear that may exist in their home country. And so this is why we need to move forward. And in the House, we have passed it. We must pass it again, the Dream and Promise Act. For those who are here in the United States, this is the country they know is home, that they have the ability to truly put down real roots. At this point, they are doctors, they're teachers, they're nurses, they're police officers, they're firefighters. They work throughout our communities, and they need the certainty of knowing that they'll always be able to call the only country they know is home actually home. In addition to that, so many people come to the United States because of the economic opportunity that exists here and because of the employers who want to hire individuals. And so that comes with a bill, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which is an important piece of legislation, bipartisan legislation that we have passed in the House that we must continue to push for a vote in the Senate. And this legislation, it creates additional visas so that people can come to the United States, they can work legally, particularly within our agriculture sector, that the businesses can get the workforce that they need so that we can welcome people into the country legally. They're not subject and vulnerable to human traffickers, and that they may take that step. Also, taking that step, ensuring that we have the visas ready for those who want to come for economic opportunity, removes the pressures that exist for those who are processing would-be asylum seekers and those who would be fleeing violence. Among the steps that I have taken recently is I have joined with another Congresswoman with a background in national security, imploring the administration to set up the potential for third-party or home country interviews for those who want to file for asylum. Now, understandably, in many circumstances, one who might want to file for asylum may not be able to do it from their home country, but allowing that to happen in third countries, as is currently permitted, or home country, which is currently permitted for minors, allowing that to happen for adults, for families, whatever grouping that might be most appropriate, is an important way to take some of the pressure off of those who are processing individuals at the border. And then notably, I've talked a lot about the immigration side of things, but one of the biggest challenges that we face is the smuggling of items, particularly fentanyl, across the southern border. This has been a major issue for me. I led legislation within the Competes Act, which is the legislation that we just passed in the House a couple months ago, focused on ensuring U.S. competitiveness with China. And in the legislation that I added to the Competes Act, or the amendment that I added to the Competes Act, has a focus on setting certain standards, basically because we know many of the countries, China included, that are sources of the fentanyl that's flowing to the United States, typically across the southern border. And when we look at the fentanyl flowing across the southern border, a very small amount of this very deadly drug is killing Americans the country over. I have talked to parents who have lost their children to fentanyl overdoses. I have talked to family members who just tell horror stories of the reality of losing a loved one because they were consuming a drug that was laced with fentanyl, and they died almost immediately. It's an outrage, and I am currently working on another piece of legislation we haven't introduced yet, aimed directly at providing the resources to Border Patrol as they work to do interdictions of fentanyl. And separately, one last thing related to this, I've done a lot of work as it relates to FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, because where we have narco traffickers, transnational criminal organizations, and human traffickers functioning, they are also moving money. So allowing for FinCEN more support as it goes about the business of tracking and potentially enforcing the movement of ill-gotten gains is part and parcel of how we get at these networks, work to dismantle them, support the law enforcement officers that are doing that here and internationally, and ultimately save lives.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. This is Lisa, and I am jumping in for Dave. We did lose him due to the storm in his area, but we do have more callers on the line with questions for you. So a quick reminder for those of you that are on the line, if you'd like to get in line to ask a question, you can press *3 on your phone at any time. And next up, we've got Kate on the line with a question about the SCOTUS decision. Kate, go ahead. You are live with the Congresswoman.
Hi, yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this, and I appreciate your bipartisan support of trying to move things forward. I, however, am very distressed by what has happened with our Supreme Court and then the decisions that have then been carried down because of those choices. And I would like to know how we can move forward in a way that can help not only Virginians but also Americans across our country to have rights and freedoms on their own bodies and self. And as a parent of multiple children and females, it is very important with their longevity moving forward.
Hey, thank you for this question. Certainly, I have 3 daughters myself, and the notion that at breakfast to lunch, there was a rollback of the freedoms that we have in the United States, I think is last Friday, is pretty stunning. We are facing a reality where American women may be forced to carry government-mandated pregnancies. We are facing a reality where the freedom of American women is being impeded, and where the government is dictating what a woman may be able to do with her body. And notably, of course, as we talk about the right to choose, it goes beyond that. It goes to the types of birth control that a woman may be able to utilize. Notably, in some states, the ban on abortion has been interpreted to extend to IUDs, the most effective form of birth control and a very popular form of birth control. Notably, it was just reported today that a large hospital chain in Missouri has announced that they will no longer, as part of the process of providing services to women who are victims of rape, as they are bringing them through the hospital system, administering a rape kit for evidence collection, that they will no longer be providing them with Plan B, which is a medication that keeps one from getting pregnant. Because in the state, there is concern that the state laws could potentially be leave a medical provider liable if they provide that medication to a patient as a preventative measure. And so the reality of what some American women are facing already since the decision on Friday is to me appalling, distressing, and one that causes great fear. And I want to just speak to something that I heard from 2 constituents over the weekend. About an hour and apart, I spoke to 2 different women. And one said, she said, when I was 18, I got pregnant. It was an unintended pregnancy, and I chose to carry the baby. I chose to start my family much earlier than I had intended, but that was my choice. And her point was that she wanted other people to have that same choice. She had chosen to move forward with the pregnancy and have her child, and she wanted to make sure that other women could make the choice that was right for them. And then about an hour later, I met another woman, same story, that she had gotten pregnant at 18, and she made the choice not to continue the pregnancy. And she spoke about how that choice had enabled her a long career in healthcare, where she then provided for and helped so many people. And I say this because the impact of this ruling is felt very deeply by many people, and myself included. And the impact of this ruling it doesn't impact everyone the same. And I recognize that, but I tell these two women's story because I found them to be profoundly interesting and an example of kind of what has been lost in this rollback of freedom is that two women on the opposite side of a decision both vehemently want other women to have the same decision. And so what needs to happen next is we need to codify at the federal level the right of a woman to not have the government mandate a pregnancy. And so I would say that at this point, and I've been in many conversations, and so I'm speaking in a very, very tempered way because given the reality that nearly 50 years of precedent was overturned just last Friday, I think that there's still a great deal of work ahead of us before we move towards a full codification of where we were. But I would point to the fact that there are Republican senators who are on the record as supporting in principle the codification of Roe and support their own legislation. Now, frankly speaking, there's certainly some legislative language that I think could be clearer, could be improved upon, et cetera, et cetera. But the principle of it being there, that there is around the notion that Roe should be codified, there is some bipartisanship. And I state that because that is an issue of how the numbers and the votes that are necessary within the United States Senate. In the United States House, we have voted to codify Roe. We have voted for the Women's Health Protection Act and moved that forward, but it was not able to get the votes necessary in the Senate. So Kate, I promise you this, I'll continue working on this issue because it is incredibly important that any woman has the right to her own bodily autonomy, has the freedom to make decisions for herself. And that is what was granted under the settled case law of Roe. And it is a reality that I will work to ensure we come back to.
All right, thank you very much, Congresswoman. This is Dave, and I am back and apologize again for the technical difficulties. Next up, we've got Brian on the line. Brian, welcome to tonight's town hall. What is your question for Congresswoman Spanberger?
Well, yes, hi. Good evening, Congresswoman.
Good evening.
I had a question now that I listened to you that it seems a bit self-serving, but I was looking at inflation. My wife and I are retired on Social Security, and I had heard that there is some subsidy for broadband that Biden signed in to law, but I just wondered what that was and how you could make use of it. And the other thing that occurred listening to all these questions that you have about the Supreme Court. I heard a very interesting comment. A fellow named Fallows wrote an article in the Atlantic about how to reform the Supreme Court, and it was really quite insightful. He was suggesting that there be term limits, and that the term be 18 years, and that it's set up so that every president that gets elected has two Supreme Court appointees during his administration. It was quite a good idea because then it would take a lot of the politics out of the appointments. And the other thing that was mentioned in that was that, in fact, there should be a limit to an age. If you reach 80, for example, you should have to retire. It shouldn't be mandatory. It shouldn't be arbitrary. It should be mandated. You retire at 80. No other Supreme Court in the world, in the Western world, allows for these types of lifetime appointments of judges. None, except us. So I wonder if you could support that kind of bill in Congress, and maybe we could get some senators to see logic of that.
And
Thank
Brian,
you.
I think absolutely. So I appreciate you bringing up that article. I'm going to have to read it. There are so many proposals out there about how to improve upon our current processes, and I mentioned certainly as a representative within the Article 1 branch of government. I would say that includes, there are many proposals out there about how to improve upon Congress. I won't get into all of them, but there are some about changing the size of Congress, making sure that members of Congress are representing fewer people, kind of back in the original construct, where the representative to represented ratio is much, much smaller. And so I will be interested to follow up and read the article that you mentioned. And certainly there are many interested in proposals about how to plan for the future, strengthen institutions, be they the judicial branch or even the executive branch. But your question was about broadband connectivity. And so certainly I would note in the Consolidated Appropriations Bill of 2021, so that's a bill that we passed in December 2021, there was a program in there to support internet connectivity at people's homes. And so this is in the circumstance where people have broadband connectivity. You can get a discount up to $30 a month towards internet service for eligible households. And you can also get a one-time discount for the purchase of a laptop or a desktop computer. And so we can get you more information. And frankly, thank you for bringing this up, because we'll send it out in our newsletter and in follow-up for anyone who might be interested in these programs if they may be eligible. And then I would also note that that's for folks who already have internet, where they're trying to actually access and pay the provider. Separately, I have worked, and this is an issue not in all of the counties that I represent, but in many, broadband connectivity continues to be a challenge. My work as it relates to the Reconnect program and additional funding to that has been really beneficial on the ground. And also then there's the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that is an important investment in expanding internet connectivity to communities that don't have it. So that bill, so one, we're working, if you don't yet have internet, and I'm talking to you on the telephone, we are still working. I am relentless on getting broadband connectivity, and certainly over the past couple of years, Virginia has improved significantly. But then if you do have access to internet and it becomes an affordability issue, in that consolidated appropriations that we did back in December 2021, we increased, actually, yes, I believe it was December 2021. We created this program, and then within the infrastructure bill, further funded it. It might have been December 2020 we passed it. Anyway, it was the consolidation bill of 2021. Consolidated appropriations. And then with infrastructure, we further funded it, and millions of homes have been eligible for this program. So Brian, I would point you towards this program, and we'll provide additional information about this program in our newsletter. If you don't receive the newsletter, it's spanberger.house.gov. If you have any questions, you can also be in touch with our office. So Brian, if you want to be in touch with us and just have us help you sign up, we can do that as well, 804-401-4110.
All right, thank you very much, Congresswoman. And that's going to bring us to the end of our question and answer period for tonight's town hall. We're just about ready to wrap this up, but before we do, I'm going to turn the floor back over to Congresswoman Spanberger for some final thoughts. Congresswoman.
I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. Thanks for enduring slight technical problems, but it's been a great opportunity to hear directly from you. I think certainly the number of questions that we had coming through related to the Supreme Court's decision is consistent with the incoming mail and phone calls that we're receiving to the office. I certainly thank those who called in about issues of affordability related to home heating oil, related to broadband connectivity, related to gas and food prices. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to answer those questions. And certainly as we continue to monitor the issue related to baby formula, if anyone who's listening tonight continues to face challenges with baby formula, particularly if there's a specialty type of baby formula, please do be in touch with our office. Your feedback, your comments, the things you agree with, the things you disagree with, the things that are on your mind, providing that information to us is always incredibly, incredibly useful. I am grateful for every letter and every email, every phone call we receive. And we really do utilize that information to understand. I utilize that information to understand what's top of mind for the people across our district. So thank you for spending the evening with us. Thank you for tuning in. And please, if you're not signed up for our newsletter, you can do so at spanberger.house.gov. It's usually one a week, and we try to keep them heavily informative so that you're apprised of what's going on. But if anybody heard about a program that I mentioned, whether it's heating oil affordability, whether it's broadband at home, internet connectivity affordability, or any other question, please be in touch with our office. As I mentioned, we can help with these issues, but also we can help with any issue that you might be having with a federal agency, be it anything from passports to I just had the occasion this week of helping a Vietnam veteran get a medal that he had earned through his service, but hadn't yet actually ever gotten. And so we've been able to help veterans get medals, help anyone with questions related to Social Security, with Medicare, the VA. Please, we are here to serve you. We've returned millions and millions of dollars. I think over $15 million the last we cleared that threshold. And we're here to serve you. So any questions you have, please let us be of service. It's my job, and we've got a whole team of folks who are working as well to help you in whatever way we can. So thank you so much for your attention tonight. Thanks for joining, and I hope you have a safe evening. And again, thanks for being on the line.
All right, thank you, Congresswoman, and thanks to all of our callers for taking the time to join us for this important Virginia-focused telephone town hall with Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. We appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions, but if we were not able to get to your question this evening, you can call our district office at 804-401-4110 during normal business hours or go to spanberger.house.gov. Thank you again, stay safe, and have a good evening.